think I just did it. Hello.
Hi,
Hi, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really, really good. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us all here for this conversation between two creative people. How's it
Yeah.
going in California? How's it going with the lockdown?
It's good. First of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate
My pleasure.
the opportunity to talk to you and to see another human face, even if it's virtually.
Yeah. Yeah, and
It's
on two
been,
completely different parts of the world as well.
I know, you're in London, right?
Yeah, London.
Yeah. So as far as the lockdown, Cali is still in a relative state of lockdown. There are some things that are open, there are some things that are very closed. It's a little confusing.
Right.
The thing we have going for us is that it's like 75 degrees outside.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and so it's really nice and outdoors is, relatively safe. And the things
Yeah.
I like to do outdoors are kind of like, I like to like walk in
Yeah.
the hills or surf, so I'm not really worried about COVID in that regard. What about
Yeah.
London? What's London like right now?
London. So I'm so glad that the weather is really nice where you are because for me, everything was fine with the COVID situation until 2 weeks ago it went below 0 degrees.
Oh
And the only
no.
freedom we really had was to be outside, and all of a sudden, just going out for a coffee
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
painful. So it was really miserable for a couple of weeks, but it has subsided. The sun is now back out, so
Yeah.
it feels better. I must admit, it feels much
I
better.
so feel for you and so many friends and family that I have that don't live in like generally temperate climates like California. We have our own things to contend with. It is nice year round, but we also like it all burns down a couple times a year, so we have to deal with that.
That's
Any
not always
number
such a
of
great
things.
thing.
Yeah. I've basically been figuring out the older I get that nature is trying to kill us for the most part around every corner. So we should probably try and enjoy ourselves as much as we can and
Well,
make some peace
this
with
is
it.
it's an interesting topic because I know that a lot of your artwork looks at the environment and the impact that we're having on the environment.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And when I say nature is trying to kill us, I don't mean that in like a defeatist or a nihilistic sense. I think that there's something miraculous about being a human animal and that like
mm,
our adaptations are hard won
mm,
over millennia, and the fact that we survive with relative comfort and relative ease and is pretty miraculous. And all things considered, we are extremely lucky to be alive and, you know, in a human earth suit when
mm,
we're alive. Um, Even amongst a pandemic, a global pandemic, and all the other things that are definitely going going weird in the human world right now, we're still extraordinarily lucky to be alive right now.
yeah, I
You know what I
completely
mean?
agree. Especially as creative people,
Mm,
creativity and making art and making music, it's to me it's the peak experience of being a human being, the fact that we
I
have that
agree.
outlet.
I
um,
absolutely agree with you. I found some of my most, I suppose I should say, wondrous moments, the most miraculous moments, my most treasured memories are in amongst a creative process. There have been some really memorable and fantastic and transcendent moments in sort of performance areas, like making music and playing music in front of lots of people is uh, an otherworldly experience. It's not like anything else I can really describe. Um, but this is something I'm sure you can attest to also as an artist. There's nothing quite like being in the flow of making
mm,
something, whether it's a painting or a song or whatever type of sort of creative involvement that you have. When
mm,
you're in that process and you're almost not thinking about what you're doing, you're just sort of doing it. Um, there's nothing else like it. It is peak experience. It's to
mm,
be in that flow state it's quasi religious,
mm,
because you feel like as a human being in a human body, you're not really the important part anymore. You feel like you're like this open, empty vessel that something else is rushing through.
mm.
Does that make sense? Have you ever
Yeah,
had that experience?
yeah. I mean, I have, and I think that's the thing that really made me so desperate to pursue a career in art. I think the first time
Mm,
you have that experience, you spend the rest of your life chasing it because it's so
yeah.
powerful getting to that
Mm,
state of flow.
mm,
So but it sounds like well, from what you're saying, that you've had that experience through your art, but you've also had
yeah.
that experience on stage as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So how does that compare?
I've never actually tried to compare them before. I have just been observant in amongst that process and learned that they both kind of stem from the same source. And so I try to do my best to not discriminate too much. I just like to be of service to which one shows up. So I use the term branching a lot, like um, branching being analogous to the way that creativity happens. It feels like this, like it has a root or a muse or a seed, and then it pops through the surface, and then if you create an environment around it, um, that's conducive to creativity, it has a tendency to just like go off in lots of different directions. And so that has been my experience at least. And so the two main directions, or the two sort of strongest branches, have been music and visual art. There are lots of other places it goes too, where you can employ that kind of creativity. But I suppose the loudest ones in my life have been music and painting.
Yeah, this is why I'm particularly wanted to talk to you, is because for me, having had these experiences of getting into a state of flow and it's sort of materializing through a painting or whatnot, I've always found that it has come out in several different ways, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
photography or writing a poem, and I never really meet people like that. So I think it's very unique,
You
how
don't meet
open you are to
people
that.
you don't meet people that are artists in some trade that have a kind of multidisciplinary experience of sorts, for lack of a better term.
I meet a lot of people who know what they do and they stick to it for some reason.
Hmm.
For
Okay.
various reasons. I'm not sure why, but
And I hear what you're saying, and I know that that has been the kind of common experience of most artists, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think part of why people feel the need to hunker down on the one thing that they find out that they're good at is because of maybe an unfortunate sort of cultural misconception about what creativity is and what it can be. And then so people, this is maybe where creativity intersects um, with commerce. You
yeah.
find something that you might be good at, and you see an opportunity, you see an opening or a window into a life where you could do this one thing that you know you're good at, and maybe even, God forbid, like you love to do, and you could do that to make a living. And there's something wonderful about that. But there's also something potentially limiting and boundary creating in that, because of where it intersects with commerce, and that's where there is danger for the artist in getting sort of captured.
Mm,
And having had that experience myself, that's why I'm speaking to it, because I know that um, as a young person, I mean, as long as I can remember, I've been painting and drawing and taking pictures and humming songs and writing poems. It's always been the branching tree analogy, for as long as I can remember. But then there was a period of time where it was like, if you want to do this professionally, in this case, music, you need to throw all that shit away. It needs to be
right.
just music. And largely it became just music. And I'm really thankful for it. But I was quietly always painting. I just didn't share it. You
Mm,
know what I mean? I was quietly always drawing, always taking pictures, always doing these things. And I think that artists, every artist I've ever met never does just one thing. They're just sort of known for the one thing if they achieve some type of notoriety, you
Right.
know? And so there's always been a sense of like incompleteness attached to it.
Yeah.
Um, like maybe there was another area that I could tie this into or branch it into. So I suppose, I know I'm rambling, sorry, but what I've tried to do over the years is be inclusive to the different kinds of uh, creativity and artistry that seem to be wanting to peck into
Mm-hmm.
my focus. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's lots of things that are trying to draw my focus away from this one thing. And so one day I just said, like, I'm going to see what happens if I just broaden my scope a little bit. And it didn't just, it hasn't distracted. In fact, it's like added to each
Wow.
of the different mediums. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's very inspiring to hear that, because I have
Okay,
so
good.
many other creative pursuits as well. So
Right.
maybe I should look into that. So so you've obviously got these two branches to your creative outlet, which are predominantly music and painting. Um, does music feed into your artwork in any way, or is it two totally separate things?
It does. Music does feed into the artwork, and the artwork feeds into the music. It's so interesting. I love talking about creativity, not because I'm an expert in it by any stretch of the term, or because I happen to be like a quote professional artist. I love talking about it because I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about. Like, and you could probably
No one
tell.
does. That's a big secret.
No, no, nobody does this. It's like this great sort of ineffable thing. And so it's fun to sort of muse about what is going on, even though none of us really actually know. It's this thing that wells up inside of us, and we feel an overwhelming urge to, like, I got to write this down. Sorry, like I'm right in the middle of this of driving, but I got to pull over.
Mm-hmm.
Like muse shows up, and sometimes the most inconvenient times and spaces.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it happens really often where I'm painting and I'm fully enveloped in the painting and not really thinking about much of anything. And then I catch myself humming while I'm painting. And then I realize that the little melody I'm humming doesn't exist already independently. It's something that's sort of just pushing through at the same time. It's as if
Wow.
I've opened a window, and I know you can attest to this being a painter, because any painter can attest to this. You're kind of opening a window, and it's like there's a breeze blowing in, and
Wow.
you're steering it. So sometimes I'm just painting and I'll be humming, and then I step back, I'm like, that's a cool melody. Whose is that? And then I realize it's like it's nobody's. It doesn't exist yet. And so I
Wow.
record it, then I keep painting, and then words start to arrive, and so I write them down. And so it's like this kind of scattered process. And what I've learned is that it's not necessarily my job during that period of time to differentiate what's happening or try and make sense of it. Just let it all in, let
Yeah.
it all out, whichever direction you want to call it. And then later, then after the fact, you go in and you kind of become a scientist and you organize the thoughts
Mm.
and you like put them in their compartments. And sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes it's shite and you burn the painting and you forget the melody, but sometimes it's pretty good and you want to share it with your friends.
Well, this is what you're talking about is really interesting because I've had a recent shift in my artwork. I've gone from very classical photorealistic representational portraiture,
Uh-huh.
and then I just sort of had this point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't express myself this way, and I've gone the complete opposite way and become much more abstract, much more free. And I had an artist recently by the name of Frank Gambino. We featured him on our life drawing business, the virtual figure. And he came to my studio and he gave me some critique. And he said to me, you've got to try and find a way of, bringing what's in your heart, which is the very expressive stuff, and being a bit more analytical and learning where to tweak without ruining the
Mm-hmm.
the freedom of the piece as well. So
Yeah. it's a thing, isn't it? There's a little bit of a
thing.
sweet spot that we can find because I can relate to that. Like I do love creating. Really, the only training I have in art is life drawing, is figure drawing.
Mhm.
I went through like one semester of painting and wasn't great at it. This is back when I was like after high school, but I was quite good at figure drawing and life drawing, so I kind of stuck with that. And so a lot of my watercolor work is figurative, but I started to feel the limitations of that, sort of the boundaries of it,
Mhm.
and I wanted to incorporate the freedom of like throwing your arm with
Yeah.
a big wet paintbrush with no limitation. I wanted to feel that freedom that you're talking about, and
Mhm.
so I've been kind of slowly finding ways of incorporating um, both of those things. I
Wow.
know exactly what you're saying. Is this
Yeah.
one of your pieces behind you?
Yeah, it is.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's maybe you can't see it, but I actually it's quite a dark painting. I mean, it's about my mother. Maybe I'll reverse the camera. It's about my mother really, because she's here, she's pregnant.
Mm,
There's a it's just a bit abstract, but it's I'm learning to sort of talk about my traumas and things that happen as a child, that I seem to have this thing inside me, this kind of darkness that I don't understand, and it only seems to come out in my art because I'm quite
mm,
like a sort of bubbly person, like sort of happy-go-lucky. But there's always kind of been a darkness to my work, and I've always wondered what the hell that is, and I'm
mm,
learning to access that really. So I'm particularly interested in the way you approach your work, which seems to be, with you don't go to the canvas with a particular idea. You just sort of let what comes out, and
yeah.
let whatever was in your subconscious mind reveal itself. And that process
Hmm.
really interests me. So if you could tell me a little bit more about that, would be
First of
great.
all, it's a gorgeous painting.
Thank you.
I do see the darkness in it, but there's so much beauty in darkness, or potential beauty in darkness. I think there's so much to be gleaned from, uh, uh, for want of a better term, like shadow work. Essentially, is what you're talking about, and it's something that our culture collectively, I think, in the West, we are engaged in, whether we know it or not. I think we're in a kind of mass shadow work period of time. And there are so many things that are unwittingly attempting to distract us from the collective shadow work that we're doing, but so much of the shadow that has been unexamined and unrealized, it has a tendency to kind of rear up in very strange, like perverse, violent
Mm.
ways. And I'm still talking about culture kind of more um, in a larger sense. But you can apply that, you can scale that down to an individual person, and the more we kind of, this has been my experience. The more I kind of just once again open the window and let in or let out whatever wants to come in, whatever wants to come out, you're creating an environment that's more circuitous. It's like you're airing out the room constantly.
Wow.
So um, if an individual person is a vessel for creativity, the more each of us kind of just open the windows and just let it kind of flow through, I feel like the
Yeah.
better off we could all be, in a larger sense, as a culture, because there's less stuff getting stuck in
Mm.
deep dark corners that rear up when we're not paying attention and knock us in the head
Mm.
or cut us open. Does that make sense? I know I'm
Yeah.
kind of talking in
No, I think
riddles.
about this stuff all the time. I really
Okay, good.
do. And the more I express myself in my work, the more I come to understand that there is something flowing through me, and we are essentially vessels. And I think human beings, we have a responsibility to try and access that, because it does rear its head in ugly ways otherwise, and
Yeah.
often through dodgy relationships and
Oh,
all
it's so
sorts of.
true. Yeah,
Um,
there's so much to be examined and unearthed and uncovered through the creative process and through art. And there's so much that we can learn, really, even just about ourselves
mm,
by giving that process space to do what it wants. It's so funny, and it's going to sound a little bit strange, but I've learned a lot about where I was psychologically and spiritually and emotionally because of reflections that people I've never met. I meet them on the street and they're like, "Oh, that one song that I heard of yours from like 2001, that song about this, this, and this. That was a really interesting song." And they essentially are telling me what the song is about, and they
wow.
know what it's about way more than I do
Wow.
because I'm too close to it. And so the same thing has happened with paintings. It's like, "Oh, I love that one painting where you're painting about this, this, and this." And I have to step back and be like, "Yeah, you're right. That was about that." And I had no fucking idea,
Mm,
you know? So it's a really wonderful way to not only learn about yourself in amongst the process, but also give other people permission, not only to engage in a creative process of their own, but they, it appears they're also learning about themselves through your work,
yeah.
And so it's this
Wow.
beautiful symbolic conversation that's happening. That's always been happening. Art has always been uh, a human's way of describing really indescribable things that we don't have words for. So I see it as like the highest calling, if you can't
Yeah.
tell.
I
I
kind
love
of
it.
agree, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah.
So if you know, we both agree that we are vessels for whatever it is that needs to be expressed. How has it been for you to have people look at you and be such huge fans and tell you they love you and how have you dealt with that?
That's a good question. It's it's taken some getting used to. Uh, I grew up being, and maybe you can attest to this as well. I grew up quite kind of shy and reserved. There were places that I felt like I had permission to, just be like whatever, and um, but like expressing myself in song or in painting, like it always felt like that was always going to be something that was just for me.
Mm,
Um, so as a teenager, as I started to kind of like learn that I might be able to be like good at these things and maybe they were worth sharing, this is based on feedback I was getting from my best friends, who I started a band with. Um, I got a little bit better at sharing the stuff as we did with each other, because you have to share your ideas in order to make songs with your friends. And as it's slowly scaled up and out, it was exciting at moments that lots of people started to pay attention, but it was also terrifying because you can't really anticipate what it's going to feel like to have thousands or tens of thousands or God forbid millions of people uh, looking at you and listening to what you're doing
mm,
and hanging on your every word, um, or even just watching you, to know you're being watched when you're walking down the street or you're at a
mm,
urinal.
mm.
You know what I mean? Like there's a guy like looking over, checking you out. Like that's in the most sort of comical way, but that does happen. Like, let me check this guy out. Let me see what's up. Um, and so, like I said, it takes some getting used to. And the truth is because there's no real blueprint for it, historically speaking, you kind of go through hell for a little while.
Mm,
It's a little hellish until you learn what to do with it when it's happening and how to sort of uh, compartmentalize a little bit, but also make sense of it and really ultimately take yourself out of the equation at the most important moments. So I'll circle back to the artist as vessel, which is what we were talking about. one of the reasons why I'm continually attracted to the creative process and art in general is that I turned 45 last week, and so now at 45 years old, I've realized that me, like this guy, the I that I know, really isn't present when this stuff is happening. When a painting is happening, when a song is being written, I am the 10th part of the equation, the thinking version of me. I've learned that the I know sort of disappears. And I open something up and something else flows through. What that is, I don't know. So it feels quite magical. But there's something relieving about that, in that my ego isn't necessarily intimately involved in the creation. It's like I get to go away for a period of time,
Wow.
and there's not too much thought involved. I I know that there's a lot of like the practice that has happened over the decades of practicing painting and practicing songcraft and things like that. The practice comes involved, but the thinking me really isn't present. And so it's relieving. So that's one thing that I've learned over the years, is that I get the part of me that's communicating right now with you gets to kind of like step back and something else flows through. Do you
Wow.
ever have that experience when you're painting, or are you fully
I
present?
no, I mean, I do have that experience. I've started to. For a long time, I was kind of somewhat attached to my ego when I realized that I was potentially talented as an artist.
Hmm.
Of
Hmm.
course, that was when my ego kicked in, and I was a bit like, I've got something here. And I went on this long journey of studying art, studying fashion, just studying as much as possible, and had all
Hmm.
these expectations of what it meant to be a great artist. And that's why I was doing very kind of photorealistic representation work. And then, when I moved into the studio with Henrik Darlin and Tiffany Cole,
Hmm.
I knew that we were going to be joining this art collective with these other three artists. I
Hmm.
just looked at my work and I thought, this isn't me. When I first
Hmm.
started out making art, um, it was the most freeing, liberating experience.
Hmm.
It's kind of indescribable.
Yeah.
Um, and
But then you started thinking about it a lot, huh?
yeah, yeah. Then I was like thinking about it more, but I knew I had to let go of that in order to be a great art to really be a great artist. I think you have to be willing to let go of your ego and expectations of what you should and shouldn't be doing, and
Hmm.
um, so I've started to have those experiences again, and it's so liberating. It really
It's
is.
relieving, isn't it? There's like a
Such a
relief.
relief.
It's
Such a
like it's like you're exhaling after
yeah,
holding your breath for a long time, and all of a sudden you notice that the work is better, you
yeah.
know,
It's
and you're not trying
crazy.
as hard.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden, I don't care much anymore what people think of my work. Whereas before, I
Yeah,
really did. I really did.
yeah, yeah, and that's a normal. I think that's a normal arc for an artist, and especially once again, have the intersection of there's the art and then there's the awareness that people are looking at the art. It
Mm,
changes the equation.
mm,
Um, and so, of course, ego is going to get involved there. And some people get stuck there, you
mm,
know, and we've all been stuck there. And some people get mired there for years at a time. And then it's no surprise that artist block comes right on the heels of that,
mm,
right on the heels of that. It's almost predictable. Um, and it's not as if artists that are in flow much of the time don't also experience periods of time where they feel uninspired. I think that's just natural. Um, so what I've tried to do, and I've talked quite a lot about this over the years with different people, what I've tried to do during the periods of time where I'm not feeling like inspired, um, it's tough to even say that because the world is just a limitless treasure trove of inspiration, like when you look at it through the right set of eyes, you know. But there are the periods of time where you're just like, there's nothing coming. what's wrong with me? I'm done. I'm broken. Something like that.
Mm.
What I've tried to do in those periods of time, rather than like wallow in self pity or fall too deeply into my ego and those things, is just do something else. Go for a walk, um, watch a movie, read a book. And what I found is that what I'm doing by just giving it space, it's almost like you're creating an environment where Muse, who comes to visit whenever she really wants to, you're creating an environment where you're not smothering her. It's like you have a relationship with Muse.
Mm.
You're creating an environment that she's going to want to come back to.
Mm.
So you're essentially saying, like, you can come whenever you want, even if I'm driving, even if I'm sleeping. You're
Mm.
welcome anytime. But you can't demand when she shows up. Do you know what I'm
Mm.
saying?
Yeah,
All you can really do is create an environment that she's going to want to visit you often.
I
So,
love that. I love that, and it reminds me of. I don't know if you've read much into Taoism and the Tao Te Ching,
yes,
but
yeah,
yeah, I mean um, the irony of you know, the inspiration and the ego is that in some ways yourself, like, you need to sit with it and be okay with it in order to get rid of it, sort of thing, to get rid of the
hmm
fear and the angst. It's like these two opposing things, but yeah, I love that. I love that because we all have that experience, don't we? And you can't fight it. I don't think you can fight it.
What do you do when you are feeling, I hate the term blocked because it's not the right word, but it's the word everybody knows. We know what we're talking about when we say we're blocked. What do you
Yeah.
do? What has been your kind of thing?
Um, yeah, to be honest with you, I don't. When I have experienced, I don't know if I even. I
It,
understand that a lot of creative people experience artist block. I don't.
mhm.
I think I probably experience it, but I don't see it that way.
Good,
Um,
good, good, good. That's amazing then.
yeah,
Yeah,
I just think
that's
we're
fantastic. You
all
don't even have
energy.
to like, everybody's process is different. In talking to artists throughout my life, there everybody has had some experience of they have the desire to work, whether it's paint or make music, but like nothing's coming, nothing worth
Mm,
um, doing, and so they end up tearing it up or burning it or cursing themselves or
yeah,
you know, God forbid, like going off and just like getting high into oblivion. You know, that's not the
yeah,
answer either. Um, but if you have a methodology, even if it's unconscious, where you don't even let those words into your process, then that's amazing.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly. Yeah, I try not to let the words into my vortex because
hmm
that kind of instigates that we should always be able to make art. And
Yeah,
who am I to intersect that divine universal gift? I'm just a vessel, and it will come when it comes, and it won't, and that's it, really.
that's how I feel about it too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh good.
I feel like that very well said. Actually, that's very much how I feel about it. So I don't take it personally.
Yes, exactly.
it's,
The
it's
ego
nothing
takes it
personal.
personally, but we don't. I like that.
Yes, 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 yes.
So, in terms of your music and writing lyrics, um, you know, how is that for you as a creative process? Is it the same concept?
It feels very similar in that I have so rarely, if ever, approached a blank canvas or um, a blank journal knowing what I wanted to write about. You know, I've never approached a song going like, I need to write a breakup song, or I need to write a love song, or I need to write a song about cats. You know, it's never occurred to me to be that specific.
Mm.
Um, though now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I should write a song about cats.
You definitely
Um,
should.
maybe maybe it should be a musical. Maybe there should be some uncomfortable makeup, and we'll just really cleverly omit all the buttholes. Yes, I feel like this could really work. I might be onto something.
I think that's brilliant. I'm down for
You like
that.
it?
Yeah, I
Let's
think
do
it's
this
great.
together. I feel like we could make a bunch of money.
Love
No,
it. Potential collab.
I and this is a place where I've found that different artists approach this differently. There's so many different kinds of art, perhaps limitless kinds of art and different kinds of music. And I personally can kind of tell when um, the person had a really clear idea going into it, what they wanted to make. And there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. That's just not how I know how to do things. So to answer your question, when I'm approaching lyrics, I'm usually basing it off of some type of a disparate melody. Melodies usually arrive first for me. I do write just sort of random poetry, and occasionally they turn into song lyrics, but more often than not, it's a disembodied melody that just starts to kind of happen, whether it's in the shower or whether I'm painting or I'm taking a walk and I start to hum or whistle something to myself. Um, and then if I like it, I'll sort of record it into my little telephone recording thing, the voice notes thing, which is amazing. That's like the greatest part about the iPhone is the voice notes, in my opinion. Um, and then soon after, there's a melody that I enjoy enough to want to like repeat and put down on there, just like words start to show up. It feels quite magical. It feels very, um, it's really difficult to describe. It's like if I was to draw a picture of it, it would be like there's nothing. And then there's sort of like a nebulous gas exists. And then all of a sudden it forms into a shape. And then all of a sudden a word like pops out of it. And I grab the word and I put it down on a piece of paper. And then other words start to accompany that one word because that one word was lonely. And then there's a sentence, and then there's a legible thought, and then it sort of
Wow.
keeps sort of scaling up and out, and then we have a song. It's honestly don't know how other people write songs. That's just so how it works for me, and it's worked. Uh, it works enough that I've written a bunch of songs.
Wow.
Yeah, does that make sense at all?
Yeah, no, it's
Okay,
fascinating. I
okay,
mean,
good.
why, I have to ask, why do you think um, Incubus became so successful?
That's the $100,000 question. I don't know. I mean, I think that there was some timing and lighting involved, probably a lot. I think that we were probably in the right place at the right time. We filled a particular uh, cultural or creative niche that needed to be filled. I suppose you could look at it from that angle, but then not to kind of undercut what we were doing or what we do creatively, because um, I can say this uh, wholeheartedly. I'm not a great musician myself. I can play lots of different instruments, but not like well. I'm a much better singer and lyricist than I am a musician, and so I can say that the guys in my band who I grew up with, you know, are like really wildly talented musicians and technicians. And like Mikey, just for example, our guitar player Michael Lanziger, he from the time we were kids, he was just preternaturally uh, gifted on the guitar, and then that translated into piano, and that translated into music score, and so that was his sort of branching that was happening. He and he's a really smart kid too, so he was able to apply. He is able to apply all of that musical talent into lots of different areas in his life. Music is very it's very mathematical on a certain level, and so he has a very strong analytic brain. You know, so there's a great deal of talent with the guys in the band, and I also had long hair, and I still love prancing around with my shirt off. I'm sure that didn't hurt, and it won't hurt until I get like a beer belly. But maybe people will still like it. Like if I'm skinny legs with a beer belly and like wagging it around. You never know. Culture changes in lots of different ways.
You never know, Brandon. You never know.
You just don't. Yeah. I'll put a cool tattoo of like a pirate ship on my belly, and people be like, sweet.
Wow, it's just incredible. Um, so I another one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you is because now that I've joined this art collective, for the first time I'm going to be in an environment with other creative people, and we're going to be doing projects together and collaborations and whatnot. And I was thinking to myself, who could I get advice from on how to make this work? And I was thinking, well, maybe I could
Mm,
reach out to other art collectives, but there doesn't really seem to be many around. And then I thought to myself, well, for me, being an art collective is almost like kind of being in a band.
mm.
So do you have like any advice for me and the other art house crew as to how you can make it work being with other creative people and coming up with ideas
Mm.
and getting on the same page?
I've never been in an art collective either, but I think that you're right in that any creative group that are kind of leaning in and putting their heads together to form something that's bigger than any one of them individually is very much like a band. And being in a band essentially is it's just a family. It's just a family structure. And so many of us come from broken homes, especially my generation. Like it's like if your parents are still together, it's like some weird, strange miracle, you know. So we brought into our band, some of the parents are still together, but most were not. So most of us coming from broken homes brought some of those dysfunctionalities, those unconscious dysfunctionalities, into this band family or this art collective that we made. And you essentially learn the hard way that your band is an extended version of family. And so any unresolved or unexamined shadow stuff, once again, getting back to that shadow work concept, um, is going to come up for sure. And some of it will be channeled into your art, and some of that will be beautiful and revelatory and will teach you about yourself, and it'll teach people that look at what you do or listen to what you do about themselves. And there's something incredibly valuable about that. But having a successful family unit, whether it's a band or an art collective, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make bad art. And having a dysfunctional band or dysfunctional family unit doesn't mean you're going to make good art. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you could be a more functional art collective because of uh, areas in your own personal lives that you choose to shed light upon. And it will only help what you guys are doing, and it'll help attract uh, more creative people and more fully realized spirits into your world. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like I know it's a funny question. Do you feel successful?
That is an interesting question. Yes, but not because of the traditional definition of success. I feel successful because I have found a way to keep those windows open, keep those creative windows open. And um, there were times when I kept those creative windows open with sticks and duct tape and glue and my own arms holding them open. But I'm at a place in my life now, touch wood, where um, they are just open. And that feels like success to me. Um, I never wanted to predicate my idea of success around accruing material goods or a hoard of cash or gold, you know what I mean, gold or anything like that. It's like we have millennia of cultural, mythopoetic, historical lessons around those things,
Mm.
that having more doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be happier or more successful.
Mm.
Even though our culture does its best to venerate billionaires and things like that, those people aren't necessarily happier than you
Mm.
or I.
Mm.
Um, the happiest people I've met are the people that are have given themselves permission to be continually creative and to dance amongst that.
Mm.
Um, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. It really it's good to hear that because it's sometimes you forget. Like I think that's the power of Maya and the material world is
Mm-hmm.
you can easily get sucked into the stuff that doesn't really matter. Um,
Yeah, it can be a very convincing illusion, but it doesn't make it any less of an illusion.
mm,
Um, and that's not to say that you can't be financially successful and still be a happy person, but you have to keep certain things in check. If you let that be the sort of end goal,
yeah.
um, it will most certainly corrupt what you're making.
Mm,
And I really feel like people who like to look at art and like to listen to music, which is mostly everybody, I think we can spot inauthenticity. I think we can spot a fraud. You can feel when someone's pandering to you, you know, and it
yeah.
doesn't feel good. And sometimes that's what people want um, from a very shallow perspective. I think that's why things like reality television and tabloid magazines have been successful because it's just giving people those are entities giving people what they think that they want, but it's really pandering to a lowest common denominator in
Yeah.
human nature. I think people ultimately love um, feeling challenged in the right ways. I really think people uh, appreciate having the opportunity to have a transcendent experience because of looking at a piece of art
Mm,
or listening to a song and just getting knocked off their feet when they weren't anticipating it.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like that's the greatest thing in the world when you walk into an artist's studio or even a gallery and you stand in front of a painting and you get stuck there and your eyes don't know where to go next and you
mm,
feel like you're looking at something that you don't really understand and it's taking you someplace you know or when you hear a song and you're just driving down the street and you hear a song for the first time that blows you away, or you hear a song for the 100th time and all of a sudden it makes sense to you in a different way.
mm.
Those are the most valuable experiences, I think.
Yeah. We're very lucky that we can give that to the world. We can give that those experiences to other people. I think it's a real gift. A real gift.
Mm,
Um,
agreed.
yes. Um, sorry. Yeah. You were saying.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Um,
Your earrings are really cool, by the way.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I got these from this random little street in Old Delhi, down some little dirt street. Like they're they're just
Is
very
it going
traditional.
behind your ear?
Yeah, look it. So you put it through there.
Oh, wow.
I aren't they? Have
And
you
it
been
hangs
to Have you
over
been to India?
just once. It was about 3.5, almost 4 years ago. Um, we played in Pune.
Oh yeah.
But I've been wanting to go to India my entire life, and we finally got the opportunity to go there and play. And we got to be there for 4 days.
Oh
We were on tour, so
man.
we just like whisked in and whisked out. But um, it was a lot of fun being there, and we had a lot of wonderful experiences in those 4 days. On the same trip, we went to South Africa for the first time,
Wow.
which was also kind of amazing. Um, it was the most travel in a condensed period of time that we have ever done. And we've done a lot of traveling, but we went from like Japan to South Africa
Wow.
in one sitting. We
That's
were kind of wrecked by the time we got home, but it was so much fun.
nuts.
Yeah,
Oh, well, I hope you can go back to India at some point and spend a bit more time there.
I definitely will. I have some friends who are from India and some of them live there now. And the minute it's safe to travel again, I have to think about wearing like a spacesuit to get on an airplane. I think India is one of the first places I'm going to go spend some time. I'd love to go there and spend like a couple of months. I mean, it's a place that is about as far removed culturally from America as I can imagine. And
Yeah.
I love America. It's my home, but you know, you always kind of want to venture beyond what you know and see if you can walk down the street and be confused. That's actually an underrated experience.
Being confused and being lost as well.
Yeah, it's
Lost.
really fun. In an era where you can't really get lost anymore because you're carrying around a GPS device in our pocket,
Yeah.
it's certainly fun to try.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get lost at all when you were in Pune for 4 days?
Didn't get properly lost. I wandered a little bit, um, but I did get to see where Osho's ashram was,
Oh, really?
and yeah, and I grew up reading his work, and I found him really interesting. And then I watched that Netflix documentary, and I had no idea that it was considered a cult. I had no idea that they perpetrated one of like the biggest bioterrorism attacks in the history of the United States. Did you watch the doc?
Really?
Yeah,
No.
watch the doc. It's fascinating.
Oh, I'm
It
so disappointed.
so the only thing there were a few things. It's fascinating. It was very salacious and fun to watch, but they didn't touch any of the actual brilliant, enlightened philosophies that Osho was perpetuating, you know, while he was here and the stuff that appears in his books. It was more just the salacious stuff, but it is quite good. It's good from a, you know, a pulpy point of view. But anyway, I was in the car and I was just chatting with the guy that was driving, and he just points and he goes, "Oh, there's Osho's ashram." And I was like, "Leave me here, I'm good." And I was about to get out of the car, and there were just all these like, you know, like beautiful people in those like sort of purplish red robes cruising in through the front gate. And he goes, "Oh no, you can't go in there. You got to like, it's a whole process. You can't just walk in there."
Really?
Yeah, so I
Wow.
was kind of disappointed. I probably wouldn't have come back, but that's all right.
Maybe it's for the best.
Yeah,
Now that you know it is a
it
dangerous cult.
right. Well, it's not. That's debatable in this day and age with the Osho stuff. But the doc is very interesting. It's a docu-series. If you haven't seen it, it's it's a lot of jaw-dropping stuff. And what's fascinating about it is from one episode to the next, you're not sure who the real villain is. You're not sure if the real villain is the
Wow.
U.S. government at the time
Wow.
or or the cult that exists in Oregon.
Wow. What's the name of it? I'm gonna write it down.
It's called, I think it's called Wild Wild Country. People
Oh, oh
listening
yes. Yeah,
will be
okay.
able to,
I'll watch that. I've seen it. Do
yeah.
you have any is there anything that really inspires your artwork in particular?
You mean like artists or just anything in general?
Anything, yeah, anything. What really moves you to produce a piece of work or
Hmm, that's a tough question because it's like any number of things. It really depends on the day. The further along I get, the more I realize that a lot of the abstract pieces that I've been doing over the last handful of years are, this is something that occurs to me in retrospect after sort of stepping back from the painting. It occurs to me that I'm attempting to paint um, the ether.
Mhm.
I'm attempting to paint the place where everything sort of comes from,
Mhm.
the sort of that sort of infinite void. I'm attempting to paint the void is what it looks like to me, or the space where songs come from or where art comes from. And so it's less specific and it's more kind of fantastic and nebulous, and it's my version of like a nebula, a literal nebula.
Mhm.
Um, so there's some of that stuff, but then on a more kind of like earthly, sensual level, I'm uh, whether I like it or not, I'm very inspired by sexuality, like human
Mhm.
sexuality and
Yes.
sensuality, and the experience of being in a body
Mhm.
and the things that happen chemically to us uh, through arousal and things like that. Like I have felt called to paint from sheer arousal, or mirror arousal, I should say.
Mm.
Um, so things like that, there, you know, things as simple as leaving my door. I paint in a giant yurt. I don't know if you can see. I'm
No,
basically in a
let's see.
massive,
Oh,
I'm
you're
in
in
a
there
huge,
now.
yeah, I'm in a giant tent, basically.
No way, that is so cool.
Um,
Wow.
so it's got really nice light, but
Yeah.
outside of the tent windows um, is basically just the Santa Monica Mountains, and
Wow.
there's fantastic sounds that it's a biophony, so to speak. It's birds and bugs and bees, and
Wow.
there are peacocks that wander around in the canyon behind my house. So it sounds really wild and untamed.
Incredible.
And sometimes that stuff is really inspiring, just to stare into a blank canvas and have that kind of biophony at play
Mm,
in lieu of music or someone talking, you know.
mm.
What about you? What inspires you?
Well, it's interesting what you're saying about um, inspiration from sexuality, because the I often will I understand that my personality that a personality comes from from my experience. It's it's there to cover up sort of unresolved traumas and fears. We sort of have certain personality traits to sort of deal with that.
Hmm.
And I feel like a lot of the unresolved conflicts I have from my child and um, definitely have shaped my sexuality in a
Mm.
very interesting way. And
For
I'm,
better or worse, that's sort of what happens, isn't it?
yeah, it does. And a couple of years ago, I sort of gave myself permission to freely explore it in a non judgmental way.
Mm.
Um, so that is something I'm often experimenting with and engaging with. How I feel about my sexuality in terms of like dating women, for example, or certain experiences that I want to explore, or how I feel as a woman as well, and how I
Mm.
feel
Mm.
towards men.
Yeah.
Um, and I explore that through my work. For me, that's very inspiring, actually. And I
Yeah.
try and not fight it as well. I just go with it and see it as a part of my artistic practice. But I think sexuality is and sex transmutation is very powerful. I think
Mm.
it can be used in a very powerful way. I know that in certain societies and maybe 40, 50 years ago it would be frowned upon. But I do think that it's a very powerful source, and if you can learn how to channel it correctly,
Yeah.
it's an amazing thing.
It's incredible to wonder what your art would look like if you had kind of unfettered access, um, fettered by, you know, your culture, by the permission that we seek from our culture around what is right and what is wrong. And
Mm.
it always fascinates me what our art, or what even we would be like if we didn't have the same kind of restrictions around certain things. I think that there are some boundaries that we've created for ourselves over time immemorial. Some of those boundaries are probably good in that, you know, we don't want to just be like rapey monkeys cruising around and just, you know, we wouldn't be here right now if we didn't have some version of morality to act as like kind of like it's like bumper bowling, you know. Have
Mm.
you ever seen that? I don't know if you guys bowl in the UK. You hear you can go bowling and you can do it, and if you do it
Yeah,
wrong the ball falls into the
right.
gutter and you don't hit the things. But for kids they have bumper bowling and they put up pads,
Oh yeah, yeah, the barrier thing.
and so no matter, you throw the ball and it just goes thunk thunk, and it always is going to hit the target, so to speak. So um, I see morality a little bit like bumper bowling, you know, in that it's probably a good thing if we're trying to get somewhere, if we want to
Yeah,
exist into the future. But that being said, art is this place, or this vehicle, I should say, where there is the potential to imagine different ways of being, and to even in certain situations or scenarios indulge different ways of being. And so that's why there are so many artists throughout history that have been fascinating in that they almost didn't know how to operate under the current kind of like cultural guidelines. They didn't know how to be a good Christian. You know, they had to express themselves. One of my favorite artists for most of my life now, Aubrey Beardsley, was um, famously homosexual, and they put him in jail for it during his period of time. And his art was considered uh, really salacious and obscene. There's a
Mm.
beautiful body of work that he did called the Lysistrata, and it's like by 19th century standards, it was pornographic. You see it today, and it doesn't have the same kind of effect, but now it's just like kind of rad. It just looks really cool, and
Mm.
there's like, have you ever seen his work before, Aubrey Beardsley?
No, I don't think so.
It's definitely worth looking into. You probably recognize some of his pieces. Some of them are very famous.
What's
Um,
what's his most famous piece?
I think most famously he did an illustrated Salome with Oscar Wilde, and there's rumor that he and Oscar Wilde had an affair.
Did he do the he did the peacock
The
dress?
peacock skirt,
The
yes,
peacock
I have
skirt.
that tattooed on my arm.
Yeah. Oh God, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, pieces of it. The other
It's
pieces on this side.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah. Okay.
he's a perfect example of someone who uh, I don't know if he was purposefully challenging kind of societal sexual status quo of the period of time, or if he just didn't know how to stay in the boundaries. He
Mm.
was the bowling ball that needed to jump off into other people's lanes. And
Yeah.
we can, you know, relatively speaking, we can learn a lot from those kinds of things, relatively speaking. But yeah, there's a lot to be explored there with art and human experience, and sexuality being such a huge part of human experience, you know,
Mm.
and a part that we so readily try to kind of squash away and
Mm.
keep in the dark.
I did. I noticed that you had a series. Was it a series or one piece called Sex Tape?
Oh, Pleiadian sex tape.
Yeah.
It was just a couple of paintings that were kind of pointing in that direction. I read this series of books when I was a teenager. I think the book was called Pleiadian Sex, and it was sort of like this speculative science fiction about what an advanced alien civilization, what their sexuality would look like.
Oh
And
wow.
I read it when I was like 16 or 17, and I found it fascinating, and it kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's amazing. Well, um, someone did ask me a question before that I said that I would ask you, and it was
Yeah.
about your the show you did in Hollywood. Was it the Lader Gallery? The Lader Gallery. Um, sorry, I can't remember the name of it. And you did it with your photographer friend.
Oh, Tasya Von Ree. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
That
and
was, yeah.
I know that it got you were supposed to collaborate together, is that correct? But you ended up having to just exhibit your work separately. Um,
We talked about it was so there was a gallery show. It was, I guess, it was in December 3.5 years ago or so now. Tasya is an old friend of mine, and she's a really fantastic artist, painter as well as photographer. So speaking of multidisciplinary artists, she's a really good example of one. But I asked her to show. I asked um, my friend Natalie, who sings in a band called Wild Bell. If you
mhm.
guys haven't heard of Wild Bell, you should check them out. They're really good. Um, Natalie Bergman. So she showed for her first time, and then my friend uh, Diana Garcia, who's from Monterrey, Mexico. And so I just wanted to all of us to showcase together. Tasia and I have talked about putting our pieces together and collaborating over the years, but we never quite got to it yet. I have a feeling it's something that is an inevitability, but we just haven't gotten all the way there yet.
How do you feel about collaboration?
Under the right circumstances, I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Have you ever collaborated with anybody?
Mm,
Painted on someone else's painting?
not really. I've no, I've never really properly collaborated. No, to be honest.
Right.
But I think I'd be open to it.
Yeah, it's something that's been coming up a lot more recently. And I'm definitely open to the idea, but obviously the circumstances have to be right.
Mhm.
I've been talking about doing a collaborative piece with my old friend Brian Bowen Smith, who's a fantastic photographer. He was the first photographer that Incubus ever brought on tour. And then he's since become kind of a really famous photographer in
Yeah, his
general.
work's
Both,
amazing.
yeah, he's really great. So we've talked about doing a collaborative thing where I paint on his photographs for like 15 years, and
Mhm.
we're probably going to do it sooner than later. Um, so yeah, it just depends on the person you'd be
Mhm.
collaborating with. You have to collaborate with somebody tomorrow. Go. Who is it?
Oh my gosh. Can,
Living
can
or
they be
dead?
dead? Can they be dead?
Yeah, they could be dead. It's fine.
Mark
They don't got to know
Rothko.
about it.
Mark Rothko.
Nice. Good
What about you?
choice.
What about you?
Living or dead?
Dead.
Right. Oh no, I shouldn't have thrown that question at you because I don't know how to answer it myself.
The only
I need
reason
like
why
a
I
week to think
knew
about
is
it.
because of taking over Paintguide for the week. It's my
Oh, right.
job to tell everyone about what inspires me. That's the whole point of the page. Uh,
Mm,
so, listen, it's been. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. It's just been absolutely fascinating having this
thank
conversation
you.
with you. And you know, if you're ever open to collaboration with Art House, and you know,
Mm.
we would love that. Um,
What is this? I'm curious about the virtual figure drawing thing you're talking about. What is that?
yeah, so I know that you mentioned that you did some life drawings. So me and
Hmm.
Tiffany Cole, who's also in the art collective, we
Yeah,
founded an online life drawing business called the Virtual Figure, and
amazing.
we run it twice a month, and it features a different leading emerging artist each time for people
Okay.
to learn from and uh, get a different perspective of how to approach the human form. And we'll have a
Hmm.
model, and then they'll do a little demo, and then everyone will get a chance to do some drawings. So um,
Amazing.
it's really awesome. I have to admit, it just sort of suddenly grew. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, you should come along. You should come along, or you know, if you're up to doing some life painting, it would be awesome. Or just join
I'd
in.
love to. Yeah, I'd love to. I haven't sat in a figure drawing class in a few years, so I'm
Yeah,
probably a bit rusty, but you remember pretty quickly once you just start, moving your hand.
yeah. It's really it's important for artists, I think, to do life drawing. I think,
Yeah,
I believe.
it's really hard.
It is.
It's hard
It's
to do
really
well.
difficult.
Yeah,
Half the
I think
drawings
that's
I
why it's fun.
do. Yeah, exactly. You know, you do come out of it and you have to learn to laugh at yourself a little bit after a live drawing session.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you something to your direct message after we're done here that you're gonna get a kick out of, from one of the most famous life drawing sessions of the
Yeah.
last 30 years. You can share
Okay.
it if you want afterwards, just so we
Oh,
can leave kids with a nugget here.
I'm very excited. Thank you. Um, okay, Bran. Well, listen, I'm going to leave you to your beautiful day. Do you have any shows coming up, by the way, or any plans for post-COVID life?
Oh, so many plans, and they're all kind of drawn in pencil because we
Yeah,
just don't know. You
yeah,
know, I'm putting the finishing touches on a new solo record, so that'll definitely come out. Um,
yeah,
but whether or not I'll be able to like play actual concerts with it,
yeah,
I don't know. Incubus will be back on tour as soon as we get the go ahead. That's for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't wait to see you guys live. I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm a huge fan of your art and your music.
Thank
Um,
you.
Especially the way you sing, really moves me. And I was really amazed to see that there, at one point you were actually gonna play Judas and Jesus Christ Superstar. Is that correct?
Hmm.
which
Yeah,
makes total
yeah.
sense actually. I mean,
I was so looking forward to it, and then it just sort of evaporated into thin air.
why did that not work out?
It was a hugely successful arena show all over the UK and Australia with Tim Minchin
Yes, I
playing
saw that.
Judas.
Oh God, it's so good.
Yeah, he was fucking great. It
He
was
is
so good.
amazing.
I met with him and he gave me some pointers because I'd never done, like a musical of any kind before. But that's why I said yes, is because it was terrifying to me. We play in front of like 20,000 people, but
Yeah.
they were you know, but Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice actually were part of the process. And so it seemed really legitimate to me. So I said yes. And we got all the way to like within, I think like a week or 10 days of the first show. And it just went away. I blame COVID, even though it was like 7 years ago.
I blame COVID too. It was lingering there, wasn't it?
Totally.
Well, I hope that it happens again in the future. Who knows?
You never know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has just been amazing, Bran. I can't thank you enough for spending this hour with me and with all the followers. Um,
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
my pleasure. Um, okay, well, have a wonderful day, and I hope to speak to you soon.
You too. And I'm going to send something to your Instagram, right? I can send it to you.
Yeah, you can send it to me through Paintguide or my Instagram, Abby Joy Samuel Art.
I'm going to send it to Abby Joy.
Thank you.
Watch it as soon as possible. It's really important.
Okay, and I'll watch the Wild Country
Wild, Wild
documentary.
Country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, take care, Brandon. Bye,
You too.
everyone.
Bye.